The paint shook in my hands as I rolled the bright yellow color across my new bedroom wall. I had picked the cottage in Pine Valley 3 weeks ago, a tiny place with a big garden and friendly neighbors. After losing my husband Tom, I needed somewhere fresh to start over. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Fafa from Connecticut. Thank you for being part of our family. No, let me tell you everything. Hadn't meant to hide it from my son Marcus. But the morning after Tom's memorial service, Marcus and his wife Lisa had sat me down like I was a child. "Mom, you can't handle that big house alone," Lisa had said, stirring her coffee loudly. "You need to move somewhere smaller with people to help you." Marcus nodded without looking at me. "We found some nice places, Mom. Places with activities and people your age. You'd be happier." I hadn't said anything then, just listened to them plan my life like I wasn't sitting right there. That afternoon, while they packed Tom's clothes, I drove straight to the real estate office. The cottage was perfect. Small enough to manage, pretty enough to love, and far enough away to think clearly. I used Tom's savings to buy it with just my name on the papers. The painter finished the trim around my window. "Looks bright and cheerful, Mrs. Miller," he said. "New start deserves new colors." I paid him and watched his van drive away. The quiet that followed felt good, not scary. My phone rang from the kitchen counter. Marcus calling again. Let ring. He'd been trying to reach me every day since I stopped telling him my plans. Let him wonder for once. The cottage was much smaller than my old house, but it felt just right. 1 bedroom, a sunny kitchen, and a living room with big windows that showed my flower garden. The old owners had painted everything white, but I was changing that. The kitchen was now soft blue like Tom's favorite shirt. In the evening, I unpacked a box of our wedding photos, touching each picture gently. Tom would have loved this little place and the workshop shed where he could have built his birdhouses. We talked about moving somewhere quiet when we got older, somewhere we could hear the birds sing. Now I was doing it without him, and it felt both sad and hopeful at the same time. A car pulled into my driveway just as the sun was setting. Through the window, I saw Marcus getting out of his blue truck, and Lisa climbing out of her red car behind him. My heart started beating faster, but I stood up straight and smoothed my hair. I knew this day would come. Marcus knocked on my front door. First, his face showing that look I knew too well, the one that meant he thought I'd done something wrong. Lisa got out wearing her fancy clothes and that frown she always had when she looked at my things. The doorbell rang through my small house. I counted to 10 before opening it, keeping my face calm. "Mom," Marcus said, sounding both worried and annoyed. "We've been scared. Mrs. Peterson said she saw moving trucks at your house, but when we called, you didn't answer. We had no idea where you went." Lisa pushed past me into my living room. "Thought something bad had happened to you." I closed the door slowly. "As you can see, I'm just fine." "Fine." Marcus's voice got higher. "Mom, you disappeared. You sold your house without telling us. We found out from your neighbor when we went to check on you." "My house, my choice," I said quietly. Lisa turned around from looking at my new couch with that mean look she got. "Eleanor, you can't just run away like this. We're your family. We need to know where you are, especially after Tom died." "You're not thinking straight." Those words hit me like little. Not thinking straight, as if being sad had made me stupid. "I'm thinking clearer than I have in months," I told them. Marcus stepped closer, using that gentle voice that usually came before he told me what to do. "Mom, look at this place. It's too isolated. What if you get sick? What if your car won't start? There's nobody around to help you. That's exactly why I like it here." Lisa ran her finger along my windowsill, checking for dust. "You need to be realistic, Eleanor. At your age, living alone is dangerous. What happens when you can't drive? When you can't take care of this garden?" I looked at my son, now 45 years old, successful, thinking he knew what was best for me. When did he start talking to me like I was helpless? When did my husband's death become his chance to control my life? I want you both to leave now, I said softly. Mom, Marcus started to argue. Now, I said louder. They looked at each other with that silent conversation married couples have. Lisa grabbed her purse dramatically, but Marcus stayed put. We're coming back tomorrow, he said firmly. We need to talk about this properly, about what's really best. After they drove away, I sat in my little living room as the sky got dark outside. The house made soft, comfortable sounds around me, like it was settling in for the night. But Marcus's words kept playing in my head. What's really best? I'd heard those words before in the weeks after Tom's funeral. What was really best was selling the family home. Too big, too much work. What was really best was moving somewhere with planned activities and group meals. What was really best never seemed to be what I wanted. Phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom, please think about this. We love you and want you safe. We'll talk tomorrow. I turned off my phone and poured myself some of the wine Tom had been saving for a special day. The cottage windows showed my reflection. A woman sitting in a room she'd chosen, in a house she'd bought, on land that was all hers. Outside, I could hear crickets chirping and wind blowing through the old oak trees. This was what peace sounded like. But as I got ready for bed, Marcus's promise echoed in my mind. We'll talk tomorrow. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at my small piece of happiness, and wondered what they really wanted to discuss. Something cold settled in my stomach when I remembered how Lisa had been looking at my furniture and asking about my money after Tom's funeral. What's really best? I pulled my curtains shut and checked my door lock twice before turning off the lights. Tomorrow I decided I would be ready for whatever conversation they thought we needed to have. I woke up to car doors slamming at 6:30 in the morning, much earlier than I expected. Through my bedroom curtains, I could see Marcus walking toward my front door while Lisa stood by their cars, talking seriously to someone I didn't know. A woman in a business suit carrying a black bag. My blood felt cold. Whatever conversation they'd planned wasn't going. Mrs. Carol Thompson. She helps seniors with big life changes. The woman stepped forward, holding out her hand with a practiced smile. Mrs. Miller, I've heard so much about you. Your son is very worried about your safety. I didn't shake her hand. My safety is not something for strangers to judge. Of course not, Mrs. Thompson said smoothly. I completely understand. Perhaps we could just sit and chat. Marcus tells me you've been through a very hard time losing your husband. Lisa appeared beside them, her face arranged to look caring. Eleanor, we're all just concerned about you. After Tom's death, moving so suddenly, making such big changes. It's understandable, but it worries us. They walked into my living room without asking, setting themselves up like judges. Marcus sat on my couch. Lisa took the chair she'd criticized yesterday, and Mrs. Thompson pulled out a tablet from her bag. I stayed standing by my fireplace, wanting to be taller than them. Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Thompson began. Grief can make people do things that seem reasonable at the time but might not be the best choices long-term. Like isolating from family, making big financial decisions alone, pushing away people who want to help. I could feel the trap closing around me. Every word was chosen to make my perfectly normal choices sound like signs of mental problems. Marcus had told her about buying this cottage without asking him first. And now she was turning that into evidence that something was wrong with my brain. Mrs. Thompson, I said calmly, are you here as a professional? Because if so, I should tell you that I didn't ask for any evaluation. And if you're here as my son's friend, then I don't want your opinions about my mind. Marcus leaned forward. Mom, please. We're trying to help. You're not acting like yourself. I'm acting exactly like myself. Maybe that's what scares you. Lisa's fake caring mask slipped for just a moment, showing something mean underneath. Eleanor, be reasonable. You can't live out here alone. What happens when winter comes? When you need help with doctor visits? When I become too much trouble to manage from far away? I finished for her. The room went quiet. Mrs. Thompson wrote something on her tablet, and I wondered what mental illness she was writing down. Nobody said anything about trouble, Marcus said, but his voice didn't sound sure. Didn't they? I walked to the window, putting space between us. Let me ask you something, Marcus. When you and Lisa talked about my situation after the funeral, what exactly did you decide would be best? He shifted uncomfortably. We just want you safe and happy. In a managed care facility. In a community where you'd have support, friends, activities. And my house. This cottage. What happens to my property in your vision of my future? Silence lasted too long. Lisa answered first. Well, naturally, you'd need to sell assets to pay for care. But that's far in the future. We're talking about transitional living first. Transitional to what? More silence. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. Mrs. Miller, I think there might be some confusion about what your family is suggesting. Perhaps if we could schedule a proper meeting. Get out. Mom. All of you get out of my house. Marcus stood up slowly. We can't just leave you here like this. You're clearly upset. I'm more clear-headed than I've been in years. You want to discuss my property, my money, my future with a stranger you brought here to say I'm not capable of making decisions. You want to manage me like a problem that needs solving. That's not. It's exactly what this is. I walked to my front door and opened it wide. Leave now. Mrs. Thompson packed her tablet with professional calm. Mrs. Miller, I hope you'll reconsider. Your son loves you very much. Loves me or loves controlling me. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the business card Mrs. Thompson had left behind. Senior Life Solutions. Helping families navigate difficult transitions. The kind of words that made stealing someone's independence sound like kindness. My phone rang within minutes. Marcus again. Mom, I'm sorry about this morning. Mrs. Thompson said that approach was too direct, but I can see it upset you. Who suggested Mrs. Thompson to you? What do you mean? Who told you to contact her? Silence. Then. Lisa found her. She's dealt with similar situations in her family. Course she had. Lisa, who'd been asking about my jewelry and bank accounts since Tom's funeral. Lisa, who'd been checking the value of my furniture yesterday like she was making an inventory. What kind of similar situations? Her grandfather when he started making poor choices, spending money unwisely. They had to step in. Step in how? Mom, let's not do this over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? Just you and me, I promise. No. Please, I love you. I'm worried about you. Maybe he did love me. But Lisa's influence had twisted even his good intentions into something harmful. My son had brought a stranger to my home to question my mental ability because his wife had convinced him I was a problem that needed managing. Marcus, listen carefully. I am 67 years old, not 97. I am grieving, not losing my mind. I chose to live where I want to live, how I want to live. That choice is not a symptom of illness. I know that, but I bought this cottage with my money in my name. I am not isolated, I chose quiet. There's a difference. But what if something happens? Then something happens. That's life. I can't just leave you alone out there. The words hung between us, heavy with unspoken threat. I realized then that Marcus wasn't going to respect my choices easily. Lisa wouldn't let him. They'd find new ways to prove I needed supervision, needed management, needed them to make my decisions. You don't have a choice, I said quietly and hung up. I walked through my cottage with new eyes. They'd come back with different plans, different experts. They'd document every choice that seemed unusual to them, every preference that didn't match their idea of how a woman my age should behave. They'd build a case piece by piece until my independence became proof that I couldn't think straight. I stood in Tom's study, surrounded by his books and my peaceful silence, and felt something cold and determined grow in my earth. They wanted to treat me like a problem to solve. They wanted to control my life, my property, my choices. I walked to my kitchen and made myself coffee, my hands steady now. Let them come. Let them bring their experts and their paperwork and their fake concern. I'd been multiple vehicles, not just Marcus's truck. My heart started racing when I parked and noticed something that made my blood freeze. The back door I always kept locked was now slightly open. Someone had been inside my cottage. I sat in my car for a full minute, gripping my keys before forcing myself to get out. The front door was still locked, but when I opened it, the air inside felt different, disturbed, violated. Someone else had been here. Nothing looked obviously missing or moved. But I knew my home. The coffee cup I'd left on the counter was clean and put away. The pillow on my couch was in a different position. Small things, careful things, meant to go unnoticed by someone less observant. But Tom's study made me gasp out loud. The filing cabinet where I kept our important papers was open. File folders slightly messy, as if someone had looked through them quickly and put them back wrong. My computer showed recent activity. Someone had been looking at bank websites, investment accounts, property records. Someone had been studying my financial situation without my knowledge or permission. My hands shook as I checked what they'd looked at. They'd accessed everything. Checking accounts, savings, Tom's life insurance money, what I'd paid for this cottage, my monthly bills. A complete financial investigation done without my consent. This violation went deeper than stealing. This was spying. Called the police right away. Sheriff's Department, Deputy Martinez speaking. This is Eleanor Miller on Pine Valley Road. Someone entered my home while I was away and went through my financial records. Any signs of forced entry, ma'am? I walked through my cottage again, checking windows and doors with the deputy on the phone. Everything was locked except that back door. And now I noticed the screen had been cut so small I'd almost missed it. I'll send someone out to file a report, Deputy Martinez said. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I hesitated, then told him about the situation with Marcus and Mrs. Thompson, about their concerns over my ability to live alone and their interest in my property. The deputy's tone became more serious. Ma'am, if family members are entering your home without permission, even with good intentions, that's still breaking and entering. We see this sometimes in situations involving elderly relatives. Elderly relatives. The phrase stung, but I appreciated his honesty. Deputy Martinez arrived within an hour. A middle-aged man with gentle eyes and a careful approach. He photographed the cut screen, checked the filing cabinet for fingerprints, and listened carefully as I explained about Mrs. Thompson's visit and Marcus's threats to return. Mrs. Miller, I have to ask, do any family members have keys to this property? No, I had all the locks changed when I moved in. But they might have gotten keys from somewhere else. Thought about. Then remembered. Wait, the previous owners had a handyman who helped with maintenance. My son could have contacted him. The deputy made notes. We'll look into that. In the meantime, I'd recommend changing your passwords for all online accounts and maybe getting a security system. After he left, I sat in Tom's chair and stared at the violated filing cabinet. This wasn't casual curiosity or misguided concern. Someone had spent considerable time studying my finances, probably taking photos of documents. The precision suggested they were building a case, gathering evidence for some future legal action. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Eleanor, I hope you're thinking about our conversation. Marcus is very worried. Perhaps we could all sit down again soon, just family. The nerve took my breath away. They'd broken into my home and were now reaching out with fake concern. I deleted the message and called Tom's lawyer, Robert Hayes. Eleanor, good to hear from you. How are you settling into the new place? Robert, I need legal advice about family matters. I explained everything. The surprise visit with Mrs. Thompson, the discussions about my finances, the break-in, the documented interest in my property and money. Robert listened, without interruption, his silence growing more serious with each detail. Eleanor, what you're describing sounds like the beginning stages of a competency challenge. A what? When family members ask the court to declare someone mentally unable to manage their own affairs, they'd need documentation, evidence of poor judgment, inappropriate spending, isolation, declining mental state. Mrs. Thompson would have been gathering preliminary information. My throat felt tight. And the break-in. Financial documentation to support claims that you're mishandling money or making unwise decisions. A large cash purchase like your cottage, especially done without family input, could be presented as evidence of impaired judgment. But I'm not impaired. The cottage purchase was completely sensible. I know that, but if they can demonstrate a pattern of concerning behavior, isolation, secretiveness, major financial decisions without consultation, resistance to family involvement, they might convince a judge to appoint a guardian. A guardian. Someone to make financial and potentially personal decisions on your behalf. Often a family member. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus wouldn't inherit my property when I died. He was planning to control it while I lived. Lisa's interest in my money, her questions about my investments, her examination of my cottage. She'd been calculating the value of what they could control. Robert, what can I do? Several things. First, document everything. Our conversation, the police report, any future contact with Mrs. Thompson. Second, consider a thorough psychological evaluation from your own doctor to establish your competency. Third, we should discuss updating your will to protect your interests. And Eleanor, if they file papers, we fight back. But these cases can be nasty. Family members will testify about concerning behavior, present carefully chosen evidence. It becomes very personal. After hanging up, I walked through my cottage with new understanding. Every choice I'd made buying this property, changing my lifestyle, seeking peace, could be twisted into evidence of mental decline. My independence had become a weapon to use against me. But something else was growing too, a cold, bright anger that burned away the last bits of self-doubt. They wanted to treat me like a problem to manage. They wanted to steal my freedom and call it love. They had no idea what they'd awakened. I spent the evening changing passwords, photographing my financial documents, and creating a timeline of every interaction since Tom's funeral. Every condescending comment, every presumptuous suggestion, every violation of my privacy. I documented it all with Tom's careful attention to detail. Then I opened a new document on my computer and began typing. If Marcus and Lisa wanted to play a careful, calculating game to control my life and assets, I would play one too. But mine would be better planned, more patient, and absolutely devastating in its accuracy. They thought they were dealing with a grief-stricken widow making poor decisions. They had no idea about the woman Tom had been married to for 42 years, the woman who'd managed our finances, handled his business problems, and made the hard decisions when his health failed in his final years. I was about to remind them. My phone rang at 8:30 p.m. Marcus's name on the screen. This time I answered. Mom. Thank God. I was worried when you didn't return my calls. I've been busy. Look, I think we started off wrong the other day. Lisa feels terrible about bringing Mrs. Thompson without warning you first. Does she? Yes, we want to make this right. Could we come by this weekend? Just to talk, no professionals, no pressure. Maybe I could see that garden you mentioned. Look at what you're planning for spring. His voice carried that warm, reasonable tone I'd heard him use with difficult clients. The approach that said, I'm being generous here, meeting you halfway. That won't be necessary, Marcus. Mom, please. Or family. We should be able to work this out. We are family, which is why I find it particularly disturbing that someone broke into my cottage today and went through my financial records. Complete silence. What do you mean, broke in? I mean someone cut my screen, entered my home without permission, and spent considerable time examining my bank statements, investment accounts, and property records. I've filed a police report. Mom, that's terrible. Do the police have any leads? The concern in his voice sounded genuine, but I'd learned to distrust my son's performances. They're investigating, I said calmly. Though it's interesting timing, don't you think? 3 days after a specialist visits my home to assess my decision-making ability. You can't possibly think. Good night, Marcus. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let him spend the night wondering what I knew, what I suspected, what I might do next. Because tomorrow I was going to start building my own case. The man who answered my knock looked like he'd been expecting me, though we'd never met. Jim Parker, mid-60s, gray hair, tired eyes, had sold me my cottage 3 months ago. You're Miller, he said before I could introduce myself. Marcus's mother. My stomach dropped. You know my son. He came by last week with his wife and some woman in a suit. Said they were concerned about your mental state. Wanted to know if I'd noticed any strange behavior when we did the property showing. Jim stepped aside, gesturing me into his small office behind the hardware store. Figured you'd show up eventually. I followed him into a cluttered room that smelled of coffee and old paper. Jim moved carefully, like someone who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary things. What did you tell them? That you seemed perfectly sharp to me. Asked good questions about the cottage. Knew what to look for in an older property. He poured coffee without asking if I wanted any. Then they started asking about keys, whether I knew if you'd changed the locks. Told them I minded my own business. Jim handed me a mug. But I've been minding yours too since they left. Seemed like a decent lady might need a heads up about what kind of family she'd gotten tangled up with. They asked about keys. More than asked. The woman, Lisa, offered to pay me for any information that might help ensure your safety. When I said I didn't know anything useful, she got specific. Wanted to know if my nephew Danny still had copies from when he did maintenance work. My hands tightened around the mug. Does he? Of course he does. I told him to keep a set in case we needed to check on the place between owners. But Danny's got sense. He wouldn't give them to strangers, no matter what story they told. So how did they get in? Jim's smile held no warmth. They didn't get them from Danny. But Lisa was real interested in where he works, what his schedule looks like. Smart woman might conclude they approached him directly. I put down my coffee, pieces falling into place. They contacted your nephew. I'd bet money on it. Danny's a good kid, but he's trusting. If someone showed up claiming to be worried about an elderly woman living alone, said they just wanted to check that she was safe, Jim shrugged. He might hand over keys without thinking twice. Where does Danny work? Peterson's Plumbing. They're fixing pipes at the old school building downtown. 20 minutes later, I found Danny Peterson installing new fixtures in what used to be Lincoln Elementary. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 23, with his uncle's tired eyes but none of his wariness. Mrs. Miller, Danny said when he saw me. Uncle Jim said you might come by. I'm so sorry about what happened. I had no idea. Danny, I need you to tell me exactly what they said to you. His face turned red. The man, your son, he found me here Monday morning. Said you were his mother, that you'd been acting strange since your husband died. Making poor decisions, isolating yourself, refusing help from family. Danny's voice got quieter. He said, they were worried you might hurt yourself living alone out there. Asked if there was any way to check on you without upsetting you more. And you gave him keys. I gave him my keys, Danny corrected. Told him he could borrow them for 1 day, just to make sure you were okay. He promised to return them Tuesday afternoon. Did he? Danny nodded, pulling a key ring from his pocket. But Mrs. Miller, I swear I thought I was helping. The way he talked about you being confused, maybe dangerous to yourself. I didn't want something bad to happen on property my family had taken care of. I looked at this young man, who'd been manipulated by experts and felt familiar anger. Not at him, but at the people who'd used his good nature as a weapon against me. Danny, what exactly did my son's wife say to you? She didn't say much, just stood there while he talked, looking worried, real concerned like. Danny hesitated. Though she did ask specific questions about the cottage, like were there any safes or hidden places where important papers might be kept. Said they might need to access financial documents in case of emergency. The picture crystallized with sickening precision. Marcus had provided the emotional manipulation about my mental state with Mrs. Thompson and potentially others. The competency challenge Robert Hayes had warned me about wasn't theoretical. It was already happening. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated me. That afternoon I visited 4 more people in town. Mrs. Chen, my old neighbor who'd seen moving trucks at my previous house. The bank clerk where I'd transferred my accounts. The grocery store owner where I shopped. The librarian where I'd gotten my new library card. In each conversation I discovered the same pattern. Marcus and Lisa had been there first, asking careful questions. About my behavior, my decision-making process, my apparent isolation and secretiveness. They were building a comprehensive case, witness by witness, story by story. But so was I. By evening, I had a complete picture of their strategy and a growing file of documentation. Every conversation I'd recorded or remembered contradicted their narrative of loving family concern. Every person they'd approached remembered details that showed their true motives. Mrs. Chan admitted Lisa had seemed more interested in my financial situation than my well-being. The bank clerk recalled Marcus asking pointed questions about whether I'd seemed confused or easily influenced during account transfers. The grocery store owner remembered Lisa inquiring about my spending habits and whether I'd made any unusual purchases lately. I sat in Tom's study, surrounded by evidence of their calculated betrayal, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. They wanted to play a game of documentation and witnesses. They wanted to use my grief and my independence as weapons against me. I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed chronology of every interaction, every violation, every manipulative question they'd asked others about my mental state. Then I composed careful letters to Mrs. Thompson's office requesting copies of any notes or assessments from her visit to my home. I scheduled appointments with my own doctor and a mental health professional for comprehensive evaluations. But those were defensive measures. For offense, I had something they didn't know about. Tom's detailed financial records and my own careful documentation of our joint decisions over 42 years of marriage. Evidence that I'd been the primary financial manager in our household for the last decade of his life, as his health declined and his judgment became unreliable. More importantly, I had Tom's safety deposit box key and the knowledge of what he'd kept there, including documents Marcus had never seen, records Lisa had no idea existed. Tomorrow, I would visit that safety deposit box and retrieve the ammunition I needed for the war they'd declared on my independence. My phone buzzed with another text from Lisa. "Eleanor, we're all worried about you. The isolation isn't healthy. Please let us help." I stared at the message, then typed back, "Thank you for your concern. I'm doing very well." Her reply came immediately. "We should talk soon about practical matters. Marcus thinks we should involve Mrs. Thompson again. Get a proper assessment." There it was, the direct threat delivered with false sweetness. I typed back, "That won't be necessary. I have my own doctors. Family should be involved in these decisions, Eleanor. At your age, having support is crucial. At my age." The phrase that reduced my decades of competent adult life to a liability, my experience to irrelevance. "Good night, Lisa." I turned off my phone and sat in the growing darkness, planning. They thought they were dealing with a confused widow making poor decisions. They had no idea they'd picked a fight with a woman who'd spent 4 decades managing complex finances, handling difficult people, and making hard choices. Tom used to say I had the patience of a chess player and the memory of an elephant. Tomorrow they were going to discover what that combination looked like when applied to someone who'd violated my home, my privacy, and my dignity. I walked through my cottage one more time, checking locks they'd already defeated, looking at the space they'd violated, and planning exactly how I would use their own weapons against them. By the time I went to bed, I was no longer the defensive widow they'd expected to manipulate. I was something much more dangerous. a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The safety deposit box contained everything I'd hoped for and more than I'd dared expect. Tom's careful nature had served me well. Inside the metal box were 30 years of financial records, property deeds, investment documents, and something I'd forgotten about. A detailed letter he'd written to Marcus 5 years ago when our son had pressured us to co-sign a business loan. I sat in the bank's private viewing room and read Tom's neat handwriting with growing amazement. "Marcus, your mother has asked me to write this down so there's no confusion later. Eleanor has managed our household finances for over 25 years. Every major investment decision, every property purchase, every financial plan we've made has been her work. My health problems have made these details difficult for me to track, but your mother's judgment has been perfect. If anything happens to me, she is more than capable of managing alone. I trust her completely, and you should too." The letter was dated, witnessed, and notarized Tom's insurance policy against exactly the situation I now faced. But the real treasure was deeper in the box. Financial records showing that I'd been the sole decision-maker for the purchase of our family home 28 years ago, for Tom's business investments, for Marcus's college fund management. Every major financial decision that had built our family's security had my signature on it. My research behind it, my judgment guiding it. Marcus and Lisa were building a case that portrayed me as suddenly incompetent. Tom's records proved I'd been the competent one all along. I photographed everything, made copies, and organized the documents into categories. Evidence of my financial skill, proof of Tom's confidence in my judgment, documentation of my role as primary decision-maker in our marriage. Then I drove home and began phase 2 of my plan. The locksmith arrived at noon. Not the same one who'd installed my regular locks, but a specialist in security systems recommended by Deputy Martinez. "Mrs. Miller, I understand you've had some problems with unauthorized entry." "Yes, I'd like the most comprehensive security system you can install. We can do motion detectors, door and window sensors, cameras inside and out, the works." "Inside and out," I confirmed, "with remote monitoring and recording capabilities." "That's not cheap, ma'am. Money isn't the concern. Privacy is." By evening, my cottage was equipped with a system that would record anyone entering my property, document their activities, and alert me immediately to any breach. But the real genius of the plan wasn't the security. It was the bait. I spent the next 2 days creating carefully crafted evidence of exactly the behavior Marcus and Lisa were hoping to document. I left bank statements on my kitchen counter showing large withdrawals, actually transfers to high-yield savings accounts, but the statements only showed the debits. I filled a notebook with rambling entries about feeling confused and isolated, then left it open on my desk. I even called my doctor's office and, knowing Lisa had friends who worked there, loudly scheduled a mental health appointment that didn't exist. Then I drove to Springfield for 3 days, leaving my cottage apparently empty and vulnerable. The security system alert came at 3:15 a.m. on the second night. I watched from my hotel room as Marcus and Lisa entered my cottage using Danny's copied keys. The cameras captured everything in crystal clear detail. Katie going straight to the kitchen counter to photograph the misleading bank statements, Marcus searching through the desk drawer for the planted notebook. Both of them spending nearly an hour documenting what they believed was evidence of my declining mental state. But the cameras also captured them doing something far more damaging to their cause. Lisa pocketing several pieces of my jewelry, and Marcus taking Tom's gold watch from the bedroom dresser. They weren't just building a competency case. They were stealing from me while doing it. I had everything I needed. When I returned home Friday afternoon, I found their trap waiting for me. Mrs. Thompson's car in my driveway, along with Marcus's truck and Lisa's red car. But this time they'd brought reinforcements. A man I didn't recognize and Deputy Martinez from the sheriff's department. They were inside my cottage, using their stolen keys, when I walked through the front door. "Mom!" Marcus jumped up from my couch, his face arranging itself into practiced concern. Thank God you're back. We were so worried when we couldn't reach you. Mrs. Thompson rose from Tom's chair, tablet in hand. Mrs. Miller, we need to talk. Your family has shared some very concerning information. The unknown man, middle-aged, professional clothes, calculating smile, extended his hand. I'm David Wells from Adult Protective Services. We've received reports about your welfare. Deputy Martinez looked uncomfortable but determined. Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry about this, but there's been a petition filed questioning your ability to live independently. I set down my purse and looked at each of them with calm interest. How interesting. And you're all here because, Lisa said, her voice dripping false sympathy, we found evidence that you're not managing well on your own. The confused notes, the financial problems, the isolation. It's all documented now. Documented by whom? Mrs. Thompson stepped forward. I've completed my assessment based on our previous meeting and additional information your family provided. Mrs. Miller, I believe you're experiencing cognitive decline that's affecting your judgment and decision-making capacity. Based on evidence obtained how? Silence. Did you have my permission to enter my home and examine my private papers? We were concerned, Marcus began. Did you have my permission? More silence. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small device. The remote monitor for my security system. Would you like to see the footage of your last visit? The one where you used keys you obtained fraudulently to enter my home without permission and steal my property. Katie's face went white. Marcus started to speak, then stopped. Mrs. Miller, David Wells interjected. Regardless of how information was obtained, if there are legitimate concerns about your welfare. There are legitimate concerns, I agreed. About my son and his wife burglarizing my home, stealing my jewelry and my late husband's watch, and conspiring with a mental health professional to have me declared incompetent so they can control my assets. I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot of the security footage. Lisa clearly pocketing my earrings, Marcus taking Tom's watch. I have hours of footage, I continued conversationally. All time-stamped, all showing you entering my home illegally and taking my property. I also have documentation of your contacts with multiple people in town, spreading false stories about my mental state. And I have this. I handed Deputy Martinez Tom's notarized letter and the financial records showing my decades of competent decision-making. My late husband's testimony to my financial competence, along with 30 years of documentation proving I've been the primary financial manager in our marriage. Every major decision that built our family's wealth was mine. The room fell silent. Deputy Martinez read Tom's letter, his expression growing darker. Mrs. Thompson, I said pleasantly, I assume you'll want to revise your assessment now that you know it was based on fabricated evidence obtained through illegal means. The information provided seemed legitimate. Information obtained through burglary isn't legitimate, Doctor. It's criminal. David Wells was backing toward the door. Mrs. Miller, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll need to review. There's been no misunderstanding. There's been a conspiracy to defraud me of my assets by having me declared incompetent based on stolen and manufactured evidence. I turned to Marcus, who was staring at the floor like a child caught stealing cookies. You wanted documentation of concerning behavior. Here's some. A 45-year-old man who burglarizes his widowed mother's home, steals her jewelry, and conspires to have her declared mentally incompetent so he can control her assets. I'd say that's very concerning behavior. Mom, please. Deputy Martinez, I'd like to press charges for burglary, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The deputy nodded grimly. Ma'am, based on what I'm seeing here, I think that's appropriate. As he read Marcus and Lisa their rights, I walked to my kitchen window and looked out over my small piece of peace. Behind me, my son was crying. Not from remorse, I suspected, but from the shock of consequences he'd never expected. Mrs. Thompson slipped out quietly, probably already calculating how to distance herself from the wreckage. David Wells followed, muttering about incomplete information and premature assessments. When the deputy led Marcus and Lisa away in handcuffs, I sat alone in my violated but reclaimed cottage and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete, unshakable peace. My phone rang an hour later. Robert Hayes, Tom's lawyer. "Eleanor, I heard what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm perfect," I said and meant it. "The charges will probably result in plea bargains, restitution, community service, probation. I don't care about punishment, Robert. I care about boundaries. And your relationship with Marcus." I looked around my cottage, my sanctuary. They tried to steal my independence. They tried to destroy my dignity. They tried to sell my freedom for the price of my assets. Marcus made his choice when he brought strangers into my home to declare me incompetent. When he violated my privacy and stole my property. When he decided his wife's greed was more important than his mother's autonomy. "That's very final, Eleanor." "Yes," I said. "It is." As darkness settled over my small piece of happiness, I poured myself a glass of Tom's good wine and sat by my fireplace. Tomorrow I would change the locks again, install better security, begin the process of healing from a betrayal deeper than widowhood. But tonight, I was simply a 67-year-old woman who had reclaimed her life from people who tried to steal it in the name of love. And I was finally completely free. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching Granny's Voice, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.